over 40 games this December with the biggest names in the league.
Gets it from Fernandez.
Stream every game or only pay for the ones you want. Your sport on your terms with Now TV. 18 plus ROI only. Month passes sold separately and auto-renew. Minimum speed 2.5 megabits per second. Terms apply.
What if you could say hola to your dream job? Ni hao to jaw-dropping adventures? Bonjour to brand new friends? Or marhaban to embracing diversity? Learning languages unlocks a world of opportunity wherever you are. And that's what transition year students are exploring during #ThinkLanguages this December. Curious about what languages can do for you? Visit languagesconnect.ie to find out more. Languages Connect is supported by the Government of Ireland.
Say hello to the new Samsung Jet vacuums that have just arrived at Harvey Norman. There's plenty of power to vacuum the whole house in one go, with up to 40 minutes of runtime with the Samsung Jet 70 vacuum cleaner. Or banish even the tiniest dust particles from carpets and hard floors with the Samsung Jet 90, with up to 60 minutes of vacuum runtime. Samsung Jet vacuums are available now on harveynorman.ie or in store today.
Go! Follow the leader, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, the world's best-selling plug-in hybrid, is now available with 0% finance and a free home charge point worth €800. Leading the charge in plug-in hybrid technology, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV. Book a test drive at your local dealer today. Mitsubishi, drive your ambition. Terms and conditions apply. See mitsubishimotors.ie. Lending criteria applies. This is a hire purchase agreement provided by Bank of Ireland Finance.
At Lidl, we've been hard at work making sure everything is perfect this Christmas, and that includes the prices. There is our wide range of delicious deluxe crisps for just $1.65. Get our award-winning Prosecco Spumante for only $12.77, and our 6-month matured Christmas pudding for just $4.99. 3 more favourites checked off the list. Lidl, more for everyone this Christmas. Enjoy alcohol responsibly.
For live GAA score updates, stats and more as they happen, check out the new GAA Live Match Centre on the Boyle Sports app. Why not check out the hottest action on the biggest match of the week right now and make Boyle Sports #1 for GAA this championship season. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Need help? Contact gamblingcare.ie. 18 plus.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now, you're very welcome along. So we're reviewing the Sunday Papers on All-Ireland Hurling final day. We have Kieran Cunningham, chief sports writer with the Irish Daily Star with us. Kieran Shannon as well, a man of many talents whose work you'll read in the Irish Examiner. I'll start with the headlines first of all. There's a food theme on the back of the Sun Sport today. Cats got the cream, that's the camogie last night. And then who'll bring home the bacon? Limerick against Waterford today in the All-Ireland final. Beneath that, Premier League coverage, hung, drawn and slaughtered. That's Manchester United and Man City who drew 0-0 in what was a fairly drab affair. They also have Roy Keane. All this hugging, why did nobody try and win? That's the back page of the Sun. Then the Sunday Times, picture of Marcus Rashford grimacing, painful viewing. Manchester United 0, Man City 0, drab Manchester derby ends in goalless stalemate. And beneath that, I can't believe rugby stars are still playing. This is a lawyer that we're all going to get to know over the next couple of years. I think Richard Boardman of Rylands Law, he's representing the class action at the moment in the game of rugby, and he's talking about current players who he can't believe are still playing at the moment given the punishment they have taken. He doesn't name names. Back page of the Mail on Sunday then, again it's hurling all the way here. Daisha hunt down history. Limerick against Waterford, All-Ireland hurling final. Beneath that, it's a picture of Roy. Keane blasts hugs after Manchester derby Turkey. That's Roy Keane there watching for Sky Sports. At the end of the game, the staff were smiling and hugging, players chatting. Just get down the tunnel. I don't get it. Everyone wants to be pals and be popular. You're playing for Man United. Your job is to win football matches, not to be mates with everybody. We've had 2 bookings in a derby game. I've never seen so many hugs and chats after a game. It's a derby game. I'm scratching my head. I'm really frustrated. Then the Sunday Independent. Again, it's the hurling. We have the Liam McCarthy with the 2 jerseys hanging out of it, and waiting game is the headline. Freshly focused and resilient Waterford are out to end a 61-year famine. And beneath that again, it's the derby. Derby fails to ignite with rivals gripped by fear of losing. Back page then of the Sunday World. I loves me county, picture of John Milan. They should dream of blue and white Christmas, but treaty could be Santa's little scalpers. And then Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, we were great. Solskjaer thought the performance last night was pretty good in the grand scheme of things. The Observer, it's Rashford and Kyle Walker clashing in the box. If you watch the game last night, you'll know that there was a penalty initially given, and then VAR intervened. It was offside in the build-up to the moment, but there was a clash of toes. Rashford just nicked the ball first, and hence the headline, toe-to-toe. VAR denies United spot kick after ruling Rashford just offside before Walker's foul in the penalty area. And then the Star, dog off. This is Gary Neville, along with Roy Keane last night. He was in Sky Sports Studio, and Mika Richards as well. Nev, as in Neville, United must get Paul out now. And then Keane, he doesn't even bother running. Kieran Cunningham, the post-match last night was better than the match, I think. It was a pretty drab affair. Roy Keane, Gary Neville, they're commanding back pages.
Yeah, but doesn't this happen every time Roy Keane's on TV now? Like, I think it's become a bit wearisome because like every time Roy Keane's on Sky, if you have a check on Twitter what's trending, Roy Keane is trending. When United are playing and he's not on TV and they're not performing well, he's still trending. There's people are going, oh, I wish Roy Keane was there. I'd love to know what he said. And the stuff that is, like, I remember Roy Keane when he retired as a professional footballer, and he was asked what he'd missed least about football. And he said banter. And now he's become the king of banter. Like, he's become the king of the banter age. And the stuff is served up to him now. Like, I was watching last night, and it showed John Stones, who was man of the match, had a very good game, hugging Harry Maguire afterwards. And straight away, I can't remember the guy presenting, went to Roy Keane. You know, you could hear Mika Richards start to laugh. So you knew they were going to ask him. They knew they would get the reaction that Roy Keane hits out at hugs of the ruination of society. And now it's become a shtick. Like, it's kind of disappointing that Roy Keane's gone down that road because he was a really interesting guy when he was being interviewed as a player. But now I think he's become a very one-note pundit. But he's a very successful pundit. A lot of people love that stuff, but a lot of people buy it, and you see the reaction. So we'll never be short of job offers. But it's not the Roy Keane I thought that he was.
Yeah, Kelly Cates, the presenter. By the way, apologies in advance. You're going to have to be Kieran Cunningham and Kieran Shannon for obvious reasons. Kieran Shannon, did you watch the post-match?
I didn't, because I was watching the Camogie All-Ireland. But I can echo what Kieran is saying about Keane's punditry in general. What makes him entertaining pundit for a lot of the population is also explains why he wasn't a particularly successful coach. He finds it very hard to relate to the modern player. I mean, that post-match interaction that players have isn't confined to just to soccer or Premier League. But where I can understand it to a point, it was a derby. I mean, let's say you take, even in Gaelic games, I find that there's a different interaction between players after a National League game. There'll be a little bit more camaraderie. I mean, this is obviously pre-COVID, but, you know, there'd be an element of staying onto the pitch afterwards with the supporters, or even interactions between management teams. It's more like, if you use the American sport, like the NBA, it's more regular season. And you'd have a lot of this kind of brotherhood exchanges in the regular season. But in the playoffs, they just walk off. That's it. And so I can understand to a point, but I do think Keane has become a caricature of himself. And it's just as it's become predictable, as Kieran says. I mean, you would think the biggest thing is, where is the United project now? I think it's coming up to the week that Mourinho got sacked. We're 2 years on in a post-Mourinho, i.e. we're coming up to 2 years on Solskjaer's appointment, because he was a temporary appointment, was, you know, within 2 or 3 days of the 3-1 defeat to Liverpool. The question over Man United to go to is, where are you on the Solskjaer? Like, is it that he's not too bad to fire but not too good to retain? Pochettino's available. That's I'd be much more interested in that. That's a harder question to ask, rather than, it just seems like low-hanging fruit to ask him about the interaction between players and how different it is to back in the day, himself and Vieira.
No, Kieran's bang on there, because that's a big issue I would have when people say he's honest. He's the most honest pundit. I don't think he is. The honesty is very selective. He keeps saying, you know, he said a couple of times, these players will get Ollie sacked. They got Mourinho sacked as well. It's always the players, or with him and a lot of the ex-United people, it's the Glazers or Ed Woodward. I'm not saying any of those are blameless, but they do deflect from their friend all the time. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has got Keane in to talk to the players on a couple of occasions. So he's compromised there, and this isn't addressed. That's why I don't really buy the thing that he's the most honest voice in United.
Well, at one point, Micah Richards, in fact, asked Neville and Keane, what do they think about Solskjaer? Like, where are we? Is he the man to take them forward? And from memory, the gist of Keane's answer was, we have to wait until the end of the season, but he needs to win a trophy. And again, that was a little black or white for me. I was saying to Nathan earlier, if he wins the Carabao Cup as Manchester United manager, Kieran Shannon, I don't think that suddenly means they're on the right track. Gary Neville gave a far more nuanced answer and talked about how they've been winning games either on the counter-attack or via moments of brilliance. And they have moments of brilliance because they've spent the guts of £1 billion on some very good players. Of course, they're going to have moments, but they need to start dominating games like a top team would. And until they do that, the jury is very much out. I thought that was a very nuanced, good answer. Keane's point of they need to win a trophy was
it's very
a bit basic, really, probably.
It's very old school. I mean, there's kind of that template with 30 years ago, the Ferguson needed to win the FA Cup to keep his job. Different times. I mean, as we all know, Van Gaal won the FA Cup 2 days later, was gone. Mourinho won both the Europa League and the Carabao Cup in his first year back, or his first year with them. But like, Solskjaer is a dilemma. Like, I remember writing this back in January. I think United were just coming out of they had a poor run back in December, and there were respectability again come January, early February. And it comes to this, like, there's this notion, this presumption in soccer, football, that you have to be doing a bad job to move on to the next guy, to be fired. But, like, I mean, United post-Ferguson, like, there have been 3 outstanding managers available. Obviously, Guardiola, then there was Klopp, and then there was, obviously, Pochettino was a free agent now for a year. And you can just see it, that the way United are going on, because they feel they can only get rid of Solskjaer unless he goes a year without winning, or unless he goes a season without winning a trophy, or United, like, they've already, this was the week they crashed out of Europe from a position that seemed to be just that they were definitely there. And just that old school thinking that you would just think the best available man is free, get him when you can. Surely, have they learned anything from how they lost out on Guardiola and Klopp? Because you could get rid of Solskjaer in 3 months' time, Pochettino's with Madrid or somebody else, and who's the next Pochettino available? Like, they're very lucky a third is there, and the fact they hasn't grasped the nettle. And to me, I mean, it's an awkward one, because Solskjaer said it was their best performance they played against City, not necessarily the best result, because they've beaten City in a couple of games since he's been there, and he has done a good job. But the storyline was about, this is the year that United crashed out of Europe, and it just shows that he can only bring them to a level, and he's done a good job, but he's not going to be the one to do the great job to have them properly challenged. And to me, that's where the story was for the week that was in it.
Kieran Cunningham, in the main, we have All-Ireland Hurling final preview pieces across the papers. We have a look ahead to the football, because the Sunday papers obviously won't have a chance ahead of next Saturday to preview it beyond today. Rugby, brain injury, concussion is very much to the fore in quite a few of the papers rather. There are bits on the Camogie final, Peamount's win. Elaine Byrne is writing about the Galway-Cork fallout, and where the Ladies Gaelic Football Association is right now, and it's not in a great place, it would seem. And we have Stephen Kenny, who was talking on Monday. The Sunday paper portion of his comments appears in a couple of different papers. He's talking about critics having agenda against him, I suppose. Let's start with the hurling. What grabbed you?
I'll be perfectly honest, nothing really grabbed. Like, a lot of the stuff is good, but I don't think there's anything that's exceptional. And I think that's a reflection of the season and the time of year, because this has been so different. Like, this is a media slot. And for the media, the last 8 weeks of the championship have generally the GA has a run at it this summer. There's generally, it might be a few weeks crossover with the Premier League or a major football tournament, World Cup, where you've been champions at the start, every 4 years in the Olympics. But generally, the GA owns the summer. But the last 8 weeks, You've had 6 rugby internationals. You had 3 soccer internationals played at the same time. You had the entire group stage of Champions League and Europa League, the Premier League ongoing, the US Masters ongoing. And because it's been such an intense schedule week on week, I've seen the reflection in the media coverage that people haven't had the time to do things properly or do things the way they would like to do them. Because, I know myself it's been very, very challenging. Like last week, because you had Tipperary and Cavan in the semi-finals and there was in the football semi-finals, a huge novelty to that. And you had to spend a lot of time thinking of how you would cover that. And then that's over. That football weekend is over. There was all the fallout of the stuff people talking about Dublin to deal with. Then you were into the hurling final build-up. Once you get over the hurling final weekend, next Saturday is the football final. And like you're already thinking, what the hell is there to say about Dublin and Mayo that hasn't been written or said 100 times before? So looking around, like I think there's a lot of very solid pieces, but there's nothing that jumps out at me. Like probably one of the most interesting, or it's touched on by a couple of people. I think it's touched on by, is it the Ken McGrath piece by Philip Lanigan and then Tommy Conrad's piece about the importance of role models? Because Kieran mentioned this to us earlier when we were messaging each other, but how a lot of these Waterford players, even though this Waterford team plays very differently to the Naughties team, how the people they looked up to were the Ken McGraths and the Dan Shannons and the John Millans, who were seen as more free spirits than the current team. And I think that's a very interesting thing because it's something we often overlook. Like, if you go look at Mayo, like people talk about the Mayo teams that lost in 04 and 06 and they were hammered in finals. But I remember talking to Aidan O'Shea at length about Kieran McDonald, absolutely idolises him. And Kieran McDonald's now in as a coach that actually often the impact of those guys that fall short, we don't realise the impact it's had on a generation coming up. And it can be a key part of a key thing that plays into those players' careers and might go on to more successful careers. Like Michael Murphy, for example, idolised Brendan Devaney. Brendan Devaney never won anything at inter-county level, so it does have an impact.
Yeah, so that's very much the theme of Dermot Crowe's piece in the Sunday Independent, and it comes up in an interview Ken McGrath has done with Philip Lanigan in the Mail on Sunday. So in Dermot Crowe's piece, he talks to Seamus Prendergast amongst others, and they're reflecting on the fact that back in the early 2000s there was this unbelievable cast of characters, and yes, there were the quiet types like Seamus Prendergast himself or Brick Walsh or Owen Murphy, but as Dermot Crowe says, Waterford became box office because of the more conspicuous showmen. And Prendergast says there were 4 or 5 lads who I suppose drew the crowd. They were drawing energy from the crowd. That was their game. Sure, Dan Shanahan, Owen Kelly, John Milan, they were the main men, I suppose. They were drawing on that emotion. And now, today's generation, writes Dermot Crowe, is more muted, less flash. Emotion is contained. And that seems to be the kind of theme of this piece, that the emotion of the Milan, Dan Shanahan types isn't really there with this current team. Maybe it's a generational thing, Kieran, or maybe it's just the way it's going now because sports science says you've got to stick to the process and all that other good stuff. Yeah,
there's a couple of things to that. I did think they were the 2 best pieces. I think they got the feel of the day right. The piece that Dermot did and then the piece that Philip did with Ken McGrath. They felt right. Maybe in the print edition, maybe a picture of the 2000s team would have been better to go with that to reflect the piece. But because I think for the reader, which the text did, it triggers a sense of fondness. Not just nostalgia, but a fondness for that team. I mean, you're right. I mean, I don't think there's a team that has had an impact to another generation. I mean, Kieran mentioned there, the 04-06 of Kieran McDonald, but it wasn't the core of the team, I think, because of the nature of the defeats they had. I think the current Mayo team have already had that impact. You can see an Oisin Mullen and an Owen McLaughlin. They were 12-year-olds in 2012. This Mayo crew, and to the point they've taken Keith Higgins and Donny Vaughan's spot and Colin Biles. But outside of maybe, I don't think there's been a team that have had that didn't, let's say, win the All Ireland has had an impact on a future generation like that Waterford team had. Going back to Dermot's point, I think what made that team so thrilling you're right that they were off an era, but there was also a demographic factor to it. The team was much more urban. They were the last great city team, and they had nearly had a soccer mentality, playing with the sticks. Like outside of Flynn, every town, and Ballygunner would be a bit different to Mount Sion. There was a huge Mount Sion contingent on the team at the time, or De La Salle with Milan. Like they didn't wear helmets, so we all knew who they were. Flynn was the only city player from Ballygunner who wore a helmet. Meanwhile, of the country lads, there was that very steady citizen, the Brick Walshes, the Tom Feeneys, the Owen Murphys, who just went and did their job. The only country boy who didn't wear a helmet was Dan. He was City in his approach. And they had that, and it was off its time, all right. And although, particularly in Thurles, they were just electric. Like going there, like Milan to the Cork crowd, was he, as you said, was he on to the next ball? He was giving them the fingers after he got the hat-trick. But that's what made him. People don't even remember now in 2003. That was 2003. Oh yeah, that was one they lost. They kind of, all those Cork games merge in. Yeah. Look, they were a little bit, they weren't as mechanical. There were a couple of things that cost them.
Yeah.
But, by 2007, you would think that they were there. I know you did a piece with Ken and Dan, and they were during the week, which was great. But I think Ken's piece was really touching, because I think it covered, the nature of the final that we're in, the year that's in it. I mean, the guy doesn't know, the notion of the Chinese takeaway guy arriving at the door, and there's all this noise watching the semi-final, and poor Ken doesn't know where to watch today's game. Maybe he just keeps with the routine of what has worked so far. But going back to, I also think though that this team that
Kieran,
they have.
Kieran, sorry, could I just we just have to get an ad break away, and then we'll pick this up. Can you hold that thought, and we'll pick up right on it in just a moment. Kieran Shannon, Kieran Cunningham, back in 1 sec.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Newstalk has joined with Focus Ireland to help raise vital funds for the 2,500 children who Santa will visit in emergency accommodation this Christmas. Find out how to donate now at focusireland.ie/donate.
Supported by Newstalk.
At Volkswagen Financial Services, our solutions are expertly engineered to put you in the driving seat. Choose the flexibility of PCP, low-cost HP finance, or the convenience of leasing. Add extras like servicing and maintenance plans. For Volkswagen, Audi, Skoda, Seat or Volkswagen commercial vehicles, discover financing options that match your needs and your budget. Talk to your local dealer or visit vwfs.ie/affordability. Volkswagen Financial Services. Affordability engineered for you. Finance provided by Volkswagen Financial Services Ireland. Subject to lending criteria. Terms and conditions apply.
Tax. There's no getting away from it. Car tax, property tax, income tax, water. Oh, never mind that one. But what if I told you there is a way to reduce your tax? At Bank of Ireland, we're all about your financial well-being. A pension is a great way to make your retirement lifestyle achievable. It's time to invest in you. Book a phone or virtual meeting today at bankofireland.com/pensions. Bank of Ireland. Begin. Revenue limits, terms and conditions apply. Bank of Ireland is a tied agent of New Ireland Assurance Company plc, trading as Bank of Ireland Life for life assurance and pensions business. Members of Bank of Ireland Group. Bank of Ireland trading as Bank of Ireland Insurance and Investments is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
This year, we're here to make your Christmas and fill your senses, not just your baskets. Go for all-out outfits, even if you're staying in. Give in to that first festive bite. Give back to those who matter. And enjoy all the little things that make Christmas, Christmas. So shop smart, shop safe, here at Dundrum Town Centre.
Ah, it's that time of year. The old Christmas present conundrum. Well, this year, look no further than 3, because we've filled our online store with an amazing range of prepaid smartphones from just $69.99 with free 48-hour delivery. Just a taster of what to expect when you shop at 3.ie. All you need to make someone's Christmas from Ireland's largest 5G network. 3. Make it count. While stocks last, 5G service subject to plan, coverage and device. See 3.ie for details.
This year, we've all missed out on special moments. So this Christmas, give the gift of memories with the I Knew a Collection gift card. Perfect catch-ups over afternoon tea, treasured Sunday lunches, soothing spa days, or an overnight getaway at our 9 hotels across Ireland. From our 5-star Muckross Park Hotel to the Radisson Blue in Cork, Athlone, Limerick and Sligo. Plus, for every voucher over €100, we'll donate €5 to Down Syndrome Ireland on your behalf. Shop now at inewa.ie. Merry Christmas from the I Knew a Collection.
Give the gift of choice this Christmas. with a postable one-for-all gift card that supports Irish retail. Accepted in over 11,000 retail outlets nationwide and online, the one-for-all gift card is the perfect gift for loved ones. Pick up a one-for-all at your local post office and make Christmas shopping easier this year. The one-for-all gift card is issued by GVS Prepaid Europe Limited. GVS Prepaid Europe Limited is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
This Christmas, get all the non-stop Premier League action with a Now TV, Sky Sports or Sports Extra pack. Watch over 40 games this December with the biggest names in the league.
Gets it from Fernandes.
Stream every game or only pay for the ones you want. Your sport on your terms with Now TV. 18 plus ROI only. Month passes sold separately and auto-renew. Minimum speed 2.5 megabits per second. Terms apply.
Hi everyone, Eamon Coughlin here. The Goal Mile has been running for nearly 40 years. This year it's different, but we're not stopping. The Goal Mile has gone virtual, so we need you to sign up online to walk or run your own Goal Mile this Christmas. Register today at goalmile.org and keep the Goal Mile running for those who need it the most.
It's Paddy's week-long session on the Paddy Power app. So we'll have all those things that Irish people love at a session. Like, you know, shamrocks and kilts and ceilidh dancing and... Nah, only codding you. It's less diddly-eye and more what we're really about. Quality sport and unbelievable generosity. A monster 8-day rollover as specials, exclusively for our customers in Ireland, from December 12th to the 19th. Log on to our website or open our app to find out more. Paddy Power. 18 plus. Gamblingcare.ie.
Certainty. With Volkswagen commercial vehicles, it's included as standard. Quality, performance, reliability. And now with purchase contributions of up to €3,500 and service plans from $999. For vans and offers you can rely on, always. Contact your local Volkswagen commercial vehicles dealer or visit volkswagenvans.ie. T's and C's apply.
Molloy's, Dublin's oldest off-licence, now delivering all your corporate gifts and wines nationwide. Shop in store or online at molloys.ie. Enjoy alcohol responsibly.
News Talk is now available on your smart speaker. Play News Talk. Across Ireland. This is the IMRO Radio Awards National Station of the Year. This is News Talk.
It's 2:00. Good afternoon. I'm Emer McKeown. The European Commission President and the British Prime Minister have instructed their negotiators to continue Brexit trade talks. Ursula von der Leyen spoke to Boris Johnson by phone this morning ahead of tonight's deadline. Speaking in Brussels, she says they've decided to go the extra mile.
Despite the fact that deadlines have been missed over and over, we both think that it is responsible at this point in time to go the extra mile. We have accordingly mandated our negotiators to continue the talks.
The Foreign Affairs Minister says the joint statement on Brexit negotiations is a good signal. Simon Coveney's tweeted, a deal is clearly very difficult but possible. Earlier, the Taoiseach Micheál Martin, speaking on the BBC's Andrew Marr show, urged the EU and UK to continue talks.
I firmly believe and have consistently said that a no deal would be very bad news for all of us. Yes, for Ireland, as you've said it in your introduction, and also for the United Kingdom and indeed European Union member states. We are interdependent.
Sinn Féin's health spokesperson says student nurses are the backbone of the healthcare system and deserve fair pay and conditions. It follows the publication of details of HSE documents in the Sunday Independent, which shows students were deployed to the country's worst-hit nursing home during the pandemic. The documents detail how they plugged staff shortages at St Mary's Hospital in Dublin's Phoenix Park. TD David Cullinan says it's outrageous that student nurses aren't being paid.
This just reaffirms that has been happening, in my view. It is clearly a responsibility on the Minister for Health to sort this out. Obviously, this needs to be done very, very quickly. It's unacceptable that we've had a situation now for some time that student nurses and midwives are not getting any payment whatsoever.
House prices have increased by 3.5% in the last year, according to a new report by daft.ie. The Wealth report shows more than 600 homes worth €1 million or higher have been sold so far in 2020. The most expensive location to buy is Dublin, followed by Enniskerry in County Wicklow. And Wildmouth in Time is scheduled for release in Irish cinemas on January 8th. The movie was criticised here when the trailer was released over its depiction of Ireland. It's 2 minutes past 2.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to the AA.
For peace of mind, we provide cover for your valuables outside of the home, once they're specified on your home policy. Go online to the aa.ie.
Cloudy with further rain, which will be heavy for a time with some local flooding possible. Fresh gusty south to southwest winds. Highest temperatures of 9 to 12 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday papers on Off the Ball.
Now you're welcome back. So we're chatting through the Sunday papers. Kieran Cunningham and Kieran Shannon with us. So we'll leave off on the hurling in a couple of moments. Again, we're just going through various pieces building up to it. You know, you have Dennis Walsh looking at Barron and De Burka. The Twin Towers is his headline piece. Michael Foley, the angle he's gone for is the golden decade. It's very interesting. You know, he talks about what's been done in Limerick hurling since 2010. The key people have taken their place discreetly in that history. Shane Fitzgibbon, Dr. Anya McNamara, Ever O'D, Eamon Cregan, Joe McKenna, Jerry Wallace, Anthony Daly. The Limerick Hurling Academy is talked about. Elite players housed in UL. Saturdays were cleared of club games. Andy Murphy took charge of the Academy's strength and conditioning programmes. Top players, young players had to weightlift with the correct technique. There was under 16s, you know, onwards, grounded in all these various aspects of the game. Players educated on nutrition, hydration. JP and Jerry McManus invested money to secure time in gyms and at UL and essentials like team buses. The amazing stat out of Limerick, it's not a new one, but worth repeating, participation rates in Limerick City have increased by 80% since 2005. So some of the work that's gone on there is incredible. Tommy Conlon, no pandemonium in a pandemic. He sat down with a couple of Limerick men, including Andrew O'Shaughnessy, and there's a Mike Fitzgerald and a Bernie Savage and a Matt O'Callaghan, and they're in Fitzgerald's bar and they're talking about how it is different in a pandemic at the moment. These are not normal times, writes Tommy. We're in the depths of winter, not the height of late summer. People are wearing face masks, cold weather, rather than Limerick-themed jerseys and T-shirts. It is the dark time of year, not the hurling time of year, and everything is just a little bit out of kilter, and talks about banners and bunting maybe being more the exception as opposed to the rule in Limerick. Plus, O'Shaughnessy makes the point, the hype and hysteria of supporters wanting it so much in 2018 and everyone wanting to win it, that's kind of diluted given that they're going for their second in 3 years. And then the point, Kieran Shannon, that we were on just before news headlines and an ad break kicked in was just about the makeup of the Waterford team. So you've Ken McGrath being interviewed by Philip Lanigan in the Mail, and he's talking about watching these matches at home and getting the Chinese delivered, and the delivery fella scared stiff because of the screaming coming from inside the living room. And then Dermot Crow's piece, the likes of Dan Shanahan, Owen Kelly, John Milan, you know, he's talking about how they inspired this current generation, and he says, when is the last time you saw extrovert shows of celebration after a Waterford score? Whether that kind of carry on, harmless as it is, would have a place in today's more demure environment is doubtful, but it had a useful legacy. And I think it's Seamus Prendergast makes the point. Stephen Bennett the last day against Kilkenny got an amazing goal, and all he did was turn and run straight back to where he was supposed to be. So you were making a point in the midst of all that, Kieran.
Yeah, well, I was just saying that I think that there's still a flamboyance to this Waterford team. I think they're very true to the tradition that the Waterford team created. And, like, let's say, since McCarthy finished up Justin in 2008, there has been this struggle to getting that right equilibrium and for the soul of Waterford hurling. You know, Davy Fitz played a more controlled game, more, I suppose, not defensive oriented, but it was more defensive conscious. Then Michael Ryan went back to more the Justin mode. Then you had Derek McGrath come in, and it was, again, I suppose he was a groundbreaker of sorts, but, you know, playing, let's say, the more of a sweeper system. What you have now with Cahill, okay, they're not holding the crest or kissing the badge, etc., but there is a flamboyance and an attacking nature, maybe because of the core group of their team now are mature, you know, whereas they had, when McGrath took over, they had shipped, you know, some very heavy defeats in the league, conceding 4 or 5 goals. I just think there's a flamboyance about the way they hurl, but yet they're very modern, and yes, they're more emotionally measured and have greater emotional control, which is reflective, I think, of the demographic of the team and just how the sport has evolved. But I think those pieces captured greatly just the romance of Waterford. We have a novel final. I mean, here we are looking at Limerick. Limerick are almost, because Waterford are everybody's second favourite team. Limerick now are almost the bad guys in early, like a traditional force. But, you know, I mean, if someone told us post 2016 that the All-Irelands that we'd have, and we'd have this pairing, you know, that Limerick are going for a second All-Ireland in 3 years, this is dream stuff. And I thought Mick Foley's piece, I was on the Academy beat myself this week talking to Pat Donnelly, who's the current head of the Academy, but it's a very timely piece. Just, I think, like, even I got a message yesterday from a former Kerry footballer about just how much it was eye-opening to them, the structures that Limerick have put in place. And I think Mick really captures just that project, what they've done over the last 10 years. And no more than just the success they've had. We're talking about, you know, getting kids to play the game and want to play the game. I mean, the stat that jumps out is in the third or fourth last par there, which is participation rates in Limerick City have increased by 80% since 2005. I mean, like where Limerick Hurling was in the, you know, 2009, 2010, Munster had just won a second Heineken Cup, like, and you'd be in the Gaelic grounds, you'd be looking up, you could just see Thomond in the backdrop, and it was literally overshadowing Limerick Hurling, and it forced them, along with the defeats that they were having on the hurling field, to just get their act together. I mean, we'll talk a lot about Dublin and how they got their act together, but there's no one stopping in football either getting their act together the way Limerick Hurling did. And I think Mick's piece details that very well.
Yes. Kieran Cunningham, by the way, it's a smaller point, a less important one maybe, but, you know, when we mention the likes of Dan and John Milan, I mean, the helmets can't be underestimated in terms of creating superstars and connecting on a human level with the players at the moment. I mean, you can't see their faces, you can't see surprise or joy or whatever when they've had a big moment. I mean, there's no great solution. Maybe on the TV coverage, I think we could do with some pen picks flashing up when they have a big moment. That's a simple solution. Not perfect, but like John Milan behind a helmet is not John Milan without a helmet.
No, absolutely. And it's interesting, the Camogie final, they had headshots in the programme, which is a very simple idea. And I don't know why that's not done for hurling as well. Because Seamus Prendergast actually touches on that in Dermot Crowe's piece. And like Seamus, you would think, would know these players inside out. And he said, if you lined up 20 of the Waterford players, I wouldn't pick them all out definitely by their faces, even though I follow them. And it does show the way, you know, players, you know, it has made them quite invisible, helmets, and often the manager's approach, he wants to keep them away from the limelight and the media or whatever. But I do think it's such a different championship that I think I had to touch on that. Like, I listened to Valerie Wheeler's interview with Grace Walsh earlier after Kilkenny won the Camogie last night, and she was talking about what it meant for the group and basically how it was a more intimate experience. And it's very, very different to that, because that's one of the reasons I found this a bit hard to get into compared to other years, and that I associate the championship so much with community. And you can't help thinking what you've lost. Like Waterford's second half against Kilkenny, and you just kept thinking what it would be like with 20,000 Waterford fans there, or with Cavan, 20,000 Cavan fans being Clones, or well, it ended up in Armagh for the Ulster final when they dumped Donegal out, and it just hasn't been. A lot of the articles around today point out to how great it's been that the championship has run, and I get that, and that it has given people a lift. I don't like the way mental health is brought into the argument again. That it's helped people's mental health. I think it's a bit reckless to bring that into it, but. I do, you know, just talking to a fair amount of people I know around the country that are involved in the GA, a fair amount of people do feel a bit detached to it. It hasn't grabbed them in. Like, you know, in football, you know, despite what Tip and Cavan did, which was amazing, I think the only really great game we had was Donegal Tyrone, or approaching a real, you know, a real serious battle. Like Mayo Galway didn't really ignite to the extent you would have liked to. It still went down to the wire. And we might even get off in the final. Hurling has been low key for quite a lot of it. Like this, Waterford's second half of the semi final was brilliant, all right, but it's just I'd be very wary of reading too much into it this year, because it's just been such a strange season that I don't know are Waterford back because of what they've done. I don't know if Cavan will be more competitive in other years because of what they've done, or if Tip will now be a threat to Cork and Kerry in other years. I just think the last 3 months, and even the mental toll it took on players who were basically training, you know, for 12 months, and a lot of uncertainty about whether they were going to be playing championship or not, that I think it added up to a lot of strange results. So
yeah,
that's where we are.
That is where we are. So to keep things moving then, without question, the story in across today's papers that we will still be talking about for a long time is about rugby and the crossroads it's at. So Stephen Jones, rugby at the crossroads. World Rugby must take lead in addressing an injury issue that affects the game's very future. I think people are pretty familiar with the events of this week. Steve Thompson, Alex Popham, Michael Lipham, amongst others. 8 players at the moment taking a class action against the Welsh and English unions and World Rugby. It's frightening, it's horrific. I was saying to Nathan at the start of the show, I was listening to an interview during the week with Alex Popham on the 5 Live Rugby podcast, and he lost his train of thought 4 or 5 times across that 15-minute interview. He was doing it with his wife, and it was beyond stark. Steve Thompson's interviews similarly. So Stephen Jones, his take on things is well, as grim as everyone's really. He points out the medical profession diagnoses dementia as early onset if it strikes people before they are 65. These lads are in their 40s. And he talks of the lawyer Richard Boardman, who's behind these class actions. And Boardman explains the significant problem of sub-concussions, which will be key in the legal moves. These are not caused by blows that result in concussion or even interrupt the match. But the idea that a large number of softer blows to the head can cause serious cumulative danger was confirmed by the coroner in 2002 in the case of Jeff Astle. In the case of Popham, one of the players, counsel will be suggesting that the flanker had to make about 50 head contacts a game in tackles and rucks and the like, and the cumulative effect of all of these has wrecked his health. There's a quote then from the lawyer. If the likes of Alex has had to make 50 contacts, then I reckon Tom Curry now would be up to about 70. And if each of these little dings in the head is causing blood vessels in your brain to leak, then you can extrapolate that over a 15-year career, these guys are retiring with hundreds of thousands of sub-concussions. Later on, Stephen Jones says several legal experts believe the player's case will not be easy to prove, and that there seems to be a consensus on that front. Legally, this is not going to be an easy case for the players to win. You suspect really the issue is more for the game and how it continues as opposed to the legalities. And on he goes. Stephen Jones does say, for youngsters of both genders and across the amateur spectrum of all ages, I believe the sport is safe. If I did not, I would never recommend it in a newspaper or a clubhouse and would never have agreed to help start a team for teenage girls. But, he says, rugby still needs to be safer for the professionals. The previous era must be the last to be so horribly afflicted. David Walsh is writing about it as well. You know, he says the difficulty with so many sports, boxing, rugby, American football, is the damage is happening before our eyes. To get by, we must engage in what the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge called the willing suspension of disbelief. And he asks in his piece, how many of today's generation will end up with dementia, or perhaps dementia at 70 when they might otherwise have had it at 80? No one knows. And then a final point before I throw it over to you guys. Brendan Fanning, and this is a stark way to sum up his column at the end. He says of World Rugby, of course the question they don't ask, and no one with a passion for the game wants answered, is this: are you prepared to emasculate rugby's core to make it safer? You can skirt around the edges, you can order teams to restrict full-on contact to match days, though the conscientious ones are already doing this. You can monitor incidents independently, you can educate everyone relevantly connected. You can probably upgrade the medical protocol around how players are treated. You could definitely sit players down for longer when they have been concussed. None of this, however, will reduce their chances of having their bell rung. From junior school cup games up to senior professional tests, you have very fit, strong, highly motivated players involved in collision sport. Because of its continuous nature, a fair contest for possession is at the root of rugby's ethos. The flashpoints are more frequent than its hard-assed cousin rugby league. In the absence of radical change, the symptoms will continue. Kieran Cunningham, what do you made of the coverage today and the week that was?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest, probably the biggest sports story of the year, and I think it'll be one of the biggest of the decade because it's going to run, and it threatens the future of rugby. So that's why, you know, and rugby is a major international sport. So I think it's huge for that reason. I remember being on, I think it was the first time I ever did the newspaper review here, Shane Jennings was on. I remember, I think it was something around concussion at the time, and Shane was saying that his generation of players were guinea pigs. And the more I think about it, he's right, because a lot of those guys won't know. They might be starting to feel symptoms now of what they went through, or they might feel them in 5, 10, 15 years' time, but well before they should, be having to deal with anything like dementia. But, I think it just needs, like Brendan Fanning touched on it there, about emasculating the game and taking, what kind of game will we accept? And if you look at the language around rugby, like so many people relish in talking about big hits and winning the collisions and the crash bang wallop part of it. And that's a huge part of its appeal. But I think, a concussion is a brain injury. The euphemisms are used. Like if you talk, we've all come across boxers who are punch drunk. Punch drunk means your brain damaged. There's no way of getting around this. Like a knockout in boxing is a brain injury. So I can see, because it's happening in soccer as well. I think in underage soccer, especially, heading the ball will be made illegal at some stage, and it will come on. It may actually go in the adult game as well, and there will have to be radical changes made to rugby. It's been detailed. I think it's Stephen Jones' piece that they have made quite a few changes trying to improve things. But it's interesting. I know anecdotally, quite a few parents I know in Dublin have moved their kids from rugby to GA because of worries over concussions and head injuries, and that all is feeding into the rise of Dublin GA, because the middle classes have very much embraced the GA, and when the middle classes do that, money follows. But I think that will only increase more with this kind of publicity, because a lot of parents will read that and think it's not worth the risk.
Yes, yeah, I suspect you're right. Neil Francis, by the way, also writing about it, as you might imagine. I know he wrote about it during the week, but he's obviously spoken to a few people about the nature of contracts, and what's in contracts or not in contracts. And he says, heretofore, the insurance policy seemed vague, and in particular, the clause dealing with concussion. He's talking about, how many Irish players are going to be signing contracts at the end of this year. If you received, for instance, as an example, if you received one single concussive head injury that was so bad that your neurosurgeon advised you to retire immediately, then apparently you would be covered. However, if you suffered a series of head blows or concussions throughout your career and you continued to play, and then eventually at or near the end of your career, the medical team thought it was a good idea to retire, then you weren't covered. And he says, I wouldn't be too surprised if new contracts in professional rugby include some kind of concussion waiver. And he says, get legal advice before you sign that waiver, lads. I'm not even sure if that's, I don't know the legalities of that. I need to look into that. I'm not sure if an employer can present that to an employee and say, your health is in jeopardy, blah, 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 blah. That's TBC in my book, I think. But his ultimate point is the carcass, he's talking about the game and the amount of money we're talking about with this action. The carcass will be stripped to the bone, but for the benefit of everybody except those it's designed for. It's open season, nobody knows where it's going to stop, the end of the game possibly, and they're going to need a bigger boat. He details in America how, lots of the money was splashing around, and often the victims who needed it didn't get it once legal costs were paid for and everything else. That's for down the road. And Kieran Shannon, one point in all this is, you hear some of the current players talking, and they're talking in terms of concussions and how many concussions I've had, and is it 1 or is it 2 or is it 3? And the point that those taking the class action are making very clearly is we're talking about sub-concussive issues here as well. This is not about how many concussions you're having. For all the education in the game, I'm amazed to hear so many players still talking about the damage done to them in terms of just concussions. Sub-concussions just as important. There's a Boston University study that's 2 years old now, and when it came to issues with the brain, 20% of those brains that they looked at post-death, 20%, those players had never been diagnosed with a concussion, and they had suffered all of these issues. So, and ultimately, and Brendan Fanning talks about it there, when you're talking about rugby and hits and whiplash effect and all this kind of stuff, then, how can you separate that from rugby? How can you separate those hits and those tackles and those bangs at ruck time and those dings to the head, as Alex Popham's lawyer mentions? How can you separate those from rugby? Whatever about the concussion that everybody can see and results in a HIA.
Yeah, you're bang on. What bounced out for me, jumped out of the page for me, because I wouldn't have been particularly following this story over the last few weeks because I would have been in championship mode more. But like when Popham talks about who's one of the ex-Wales flanker, Alex Popham, who's taken the case along with Thompson, when he talks about that he had to make about 50 head contacts a game, like it's how cumulative it is. It's not just, as you say, one bang and you've got concussion for today and you have to take the 3 weeks out. It's how regular it is, and as you said, so it's so ingrained in the sport. I think Brendan's outro is right. The sport has to look at what way is rugby has to fundamentally change the way it's played. I mean, I was listening to Matt Williams and Colm Keys on this show last week, and it seems that rugby has two fundamental issues, which is how do you make the game safer to play, and then how do you make it more attractive to watch. And as much as you'd often hear people talk about, yes, its USP is how attritional or the contact, like we're seeing, and Shane Jennings was right when he said that to Kieran, when he floated the idea that we were guinea pigs. I mean, the notion that Thompson was on that 2003 World Cup, which still only seems such a short time ago because it was so, a Northern Hemisphere team winning the World Cup and the journey that team were on, it doesn't seem that long ago. And the fact that that man in his 40s can't remember so much about that period of time is frightening. And so rugby looks
sorry to interrupt. He said this week he can't remember his wife's name at times when they're in the room together. Like
that is, and going back to Kieran's point about how it sounds alarmist to say it, but no, this is one of the biggest sports you'll have, biggest stories you'll have, because this sport has to fundamentally change for both to get more people to play the game, because as you said, the parents factor, like American football has had this, like where like LeBron James has talked about how although American football helped him become the athlete he did, he won't allow his own children to play it because he's worried about, I mean, another line that just jumps out is when they said that, they knew that they were sacrificing their bodies playing this game, that they'd be banged up, but little did they think it would have the impact on their brain. Absolutely. So rugby seems to me like it has to really fundamentally look. Colm was talking about 13 aside last week because the space is at such a premium and it's just bang wallop. Whereas it may have to look more at 11 aside or even more the sevens because this level of collisions. I mean, I'll always remember Tommy Conlon, my good friend who's writing today. Like I remember him being at that famous game where Munster crashed into Shabal at that Sale game, and he just said seeing it up front was just an eye opener for him when you just saw that it's not a contact sport, it's a collision sport, and we're seeing now it's not sustainable and it's dangerous. And unless rugby does make interventions, obviously there's a legal case here, but we're talking about in 15 years kind of time, it has to make, I think Brendan's right, it has to make radical changes about what game it wants to be.
Yeah, the very worrying thing, Kieran Cunningham, is that we don't know the threshold that will protect players' health going forward. So the Thompson situation is talked about, well, that decade in particular was bad because there was full contact training almost every day and players were getting bigger and concussion protocols were non-existent. Fine, okay, that's open and shut case of rugby can't behave that way. So take it forward to this decade. The HIA has come in midway through, but the hits are as big as ever. And, the lawyer here talks, I'm not sure he should be naming Tom Curry, but he does anyway. I think that's unfair to do that. But he says the modern player could be taking 70 little dings to the head. So we don't know what the threshold is. And, the problem is we're into, generation 2 or 3 of the guinea pigs now, which is that terrible term, but it's the one that was used about the first generation of players. We don't know where they're going to be in their 40s and 50s and 60s, obviously for several decades. So how do we get to a point where what we're watching is something that we can all say, okay, this is sufficient in terms of the way the game is played, sufficient to protect these players in 20, 30, 40 years' time? For me, that's the biggest problem here. We know what happened in Thompson's generation was wrong. The current generation we're hoping is okay, but we don't know, and we don't know what tomorrow's generation should or shouldn't be doing to protect them. How does rugby solve that crisis in real time?
Oh, I have no idea, and it's a huge challenge for the sport. And I think it's Neil Francis's piece. I'm not sure if I have it to hand or was it Brent, but I can't remember. But he brings up the doctors Like, and you do see when all this stuff is around, like, would you want to be a rugby team doctor? Because you could be caught on the firing line. Like, you could end up having to suit against yourself for not spotting symptoms of something. And I think the sub-concussion issue is one of the most interesting things that has come out of this, because I was doing a bit on this during the week, and I was reading up on in the University of Stirling in Scotland. They were looking into the impacts of sub-concussions in boxing, and they had 20 amateur boxers who sparred for 3-3-minute rounds. And they did all a range of cognitive tests, etc. afterwards, and all of them had deteriorated rapidly, having sparred for 3 rounds. And boxers are sparring and training all the time. Like, a lot of boxers would spar every day even. So it does show, and like those guys wouldn't have been knocked out. They were amateurs where there's more protection, but they were still getting what looked like subconcussive injuries. So you can only imagine what it's like in rugby, and why this is going to be such a major story for a long, long time.
Yeah, okay. We'll come back to it many times over, I suspect. Elaine Byrne, Kieran Shannon, one of the few who a week on is looking back at the Cork-Galway fallout. I mean, it was covered extensively during the week. Maybe that's why a week on, given what's on in the world this weekend, it's not covered by more. But Elaine Byrne, one of the few to write about the Galway-Cork fiasco. Can we call it a fiasco? Probably can.
Oh, absolutely. It was just depressing, I remember just switching on the TV last Sunday, and you're seeing Galway and Mayo and there's a crowd in the backdrop. It's obviously summertime. It was just the notion that those players' families were all geared to watch the game on TV. It's one of the, obviously that's one of the big successes of ladies Gaelic football. We have to point out the relationship they've had with the likes of TG Cahir as well as Little. But it was an awful week for it, and I did think the Sunday papers would capture that a bit more in the odd maybe opinion piece, albeit next Sunday will be the ladies football final, and they might make it up there. Like, a paper like the Sunday Independent has been very good traditionally for the All-Ireland finals in both, but Elaine Byrne covered it, and I thought it was a very good piece. I mean, one thing, and I mentioned my friend Tommy Conlon from the Sunday Indo, he's often said it, I don't think in print, but in person, he says, what, and which Elaine goes into, for one thing, there's something telling about this notion of ladies football. Why is it called ladies football instead of women's football? I mean, in every other sport, you would talk about women's soccer or women's basketball, whatever. The notion of ladies football, she says, it gives off the impression, she says, like, they are not the charming, elegant ladies of the Victorian era, dressed in petticoats while riding a horse-side saddle. And she's on about how, I suppose, like, there's a lot of talk, and I would fundamentally agree with it, and Liam O'Neill has been on your show, and I remember Liam talking about that back in the early noughties, when about having basically that a more inclusive GA both at ground level and within the organisation itself. He talked about the obstacles that he ran up, especially against the LGFA, but that has to happen. But if you're waiting on that, just about how they have to be less deferential, like the notion that they never asked, and that they never asked for the Mayo tip game to be put back by an extra 15 minutes, which would have made such a huge difference. As she said, the Tipperary players were out in the field warming up an hour before the game, and here you had the Galway players. You can imagine the journey they had, the nature of how big a game it is, that they had a 6 minute and they have a referee calling at them, come on, like as if that stuff is peripheral. I mean, at the time of the year, it's been well covered on your own station, but it was just so deflating that this year is 20 by 20. It was obviously, with the pandemic, a very challenging year for women's sport. But then for this 3 weeks out, and they're finally back in Croke Park, or at the All-Ireland semi-final stage, they get to Croke Park, and that they can't even have a warm-up, and it's not on TV. It was so deflating. And yeah, it's I think that I think so much has to be done, but like this has to be grasped. Like by 2030, by 2025, it has to come in. Both camogie. It's not a case of camogie merging with ladies Gaelic football. It's all coming within the GAA, because in other sports, like I come from basketball, you wouldn't distinguish between the women's and the men's. the sport governs both. You know, it is a John Horan or Bernard O'Byrne giving out the same trophy. And while you can still obviously have subcommittees of an LGFA and use some of the infrastructure that's there, like just the weight of, let's say, the Clare County Board being able to back the women's team as well as the men's hurling and football teams, it would be massive. It's just the way it has to go. And, you know, maybe that's something that does come out of 20 by 20. And maybe it needed, rather than just being a cute promotional campaign, maybe it needed to be shown this is the ugly reality in December 2020. And this it can't be like this by 2030.
Yeah, Kieran Cunningham?
Yeah, no, I agree absolutely with Kieran. You know, I've written about this before, about the ladies' football thing. I think it does them no favours. You know, I think it came up within the association a couple of years ago, a move for change, and they voted against it. And I don't understand why. Like, it would be totally bizarre to have, if you were an athletics meet, and it had men's athletics, and then ladies' athletics, or just athletics, and then ladies' athletics. Like, why is that the case with football now? I don't understand why the throw-in or the tip Mayo game in Croke Park wasn't put back when this problem arose. Because throw-ins have been put back like 15, 20 minutes before, just because a lot of people were in the pubs, were slow coming in. And like, this was a far more major issue. It was an All-Ireland semi-final, and people who say it wouldn't happen to men are right. There's not a hope that would have happened with the men's team. And if you are to have parity of esteem and treat people the same, like, a huge opportunity was missed. And it should be a watershed moment that people pop themselves on and say, you can't treat people like this.
Yes. I mean, for me, Kieran Shannon, it exposed weak leadership at the top of the LGFA that they didn't ask. I mean, I just can't understand that. They have to fight to protect their players. They have to risk upsetting a few people. They need to march into Croke Park and say, where's Declan McBennett? Where's the GAA person I need to speak to? This is what we need to happen. I don't have to publicly shame you and reveal that you both said no to me, but this is what needs to happen. I'm fighting for our players. And actually, the LGFA have proven that they're not going to do that. They're not going to risk upsetting anyone. Yes, sir. Thanks, sir. Sorry to be here, sir.
Yeah, well, you would just hope that they learn from it, because it's, in fairness to them, I'd say they were caught unawares, but it was reflective of how deferential. And a big learning for them has to be that, no, we have to be more assertive. And I think more, but they also have to. I'm
not sure, like, by the way, just on the caught unawares thing, like, there'd been frost for 2 or 3 days running.
No, like the notion that, like, I mean, I'm
how unawares could they have been?
Look, I coach a girls' basketball team, and we had to cancel training today. Yeah. We had someone go 3 hours before trainers went to start to see how many puddles were on the court. You know, like the notion that someone didn't go to Parnell Park, as you said, like it's just, no, absolutely, it's showing how far off they've been, because often the LGFA has been shown to be, has been perceived to be more progressive than the Camogie. Yeah. But no, like. It was so deflating, but you know, as I said, maybe a crisis like this will be what is the one. It's the breaking point. It's the tipping point. Yeah. Because all that amalgamation has to happen. But also, what struck me too, like, about the coverage today, like, because it's sometimes one thing you have to do is look what's not in a paper. Like, I don't know what's going on now at the moment. I didn't see a line about Kerry and Antrim. Like, in the Joe McDonagh Cup final, there's been a lot of talk about the Tailteann Cup coming in Gaelic football. You know, you're looking at the coverage, albeit the Joe McDonagh's on the TV. It's the one game from that competition that's on TV today. But, you know, you're looking at the coverage in the papers today, hardly a line about it, and it wouldn't really sell you on the idea of having a second-tier football championship going by the coverage today.
No. I would share that concern in the real world going forward. Fellas, we're way out of time. I know we're not getting to quite a few of the things we had hoped to get to, but my thanks.
Yeah, there was a second football, or there was a second All-Ireland that was in the papers today we never got to. Yeah.
I know, these are the strange times we're in. Yeah, they're football final previews to beat the band. What we can say in short is that everybody thinks Dublin are going to win quite comfortably, but beyond that we don't have time. I'm afraid I have to get over to Tommy Welch at Croke Park. But Kieran Shannon, thanks to you. Kieran Cunningham, as ever, thanks to you. We'll take a very short break, and then, as I said, Tommy Welch is at Croke Park.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball. Screen Time.
This week on Screen Time, I talked to Oscar-winning actress Viola Davis about her new movie Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and about the strange feeling of winning an Oscar.
Sandra Oh at the Golden Globes once when she won, she said it feels like I've been set on fire. And that's what it feels like. It feels like you've been set on fire.
The director of a new movie, The Racer, all about when the Tour de France came to Ireland. Mark Ryle reviews Meryl Streep in The Prom, plus Ciara Kelly chats about her favourite movie.
Screen Time with John Farty.
Listen and subscribe to the podcast now on newstalk.com or on the Newstalk app.
Molloy's, Dublin's oldest off-licence, now delivering all your corporate gifts and wines nationwide. Shop in store or online at molloys.ie. Enjoy alcohol responsibly.
At Audi, we know some drivers go to extremes to show they love their car. While now there's an easier way. Introducing the all-new Audi Service Subscription. Enjoy 2 Audi services plus a full vehicle health check, 12 months roadside assistance, wiper blade replacement, and much more. Show your Audi some love from just $13.99 per month over 24 months. Book your Audi service subscription now at audiservice.ie. Terms and conditions apply. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Body pain can affect your whole day. But Nurofen Durance medicated plasters provide up to 24-hour effective pain relief to help you keep doing this.